Hello, folks. Welcome to another installment of poetry. Today we are going to be looking at Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. So, the concept that we're going to be looking at in this poem is symbolism. Symbolism is when you use people, objects, marks, etc., which we can call symbols, to represent bigger ideas. So, examples of this might be like a heart tends to represent love. Not always, but usually, if somebody sends you a little heart emoji, you tend to understand that they don't hate you, they love you. Green as a color often is used to represent the concept of envy. So when we talk about the green-eyed monster, we're talking about envy or jealousy. A fox often represents cleverness, and a tree often represents life. In this poem, day is representative of life, and then, you guessed it, night is representative of death. So Dylan Thomas was born in 1914. For those of you who don't know, 1914 is the start of World War I, and World War I ended in 1918. And he died in 1953. He was a Welsh poet, which means he is from the country of Wales in the United Kingdom. He became fairly famous during his lifetime. This is not always the case for artists. Vincent van Gogh didn't sell hardly any paintings during his lifetime. He was only famous after his death, for example. Dylan Thomas also wrote poetry, radio plays, and stories. He often appeared on the radio as well. Now, when I say appeared, obviously I don't mean he visually showed up on the radio. That's not how radios work. But he was often a participant in radio shows. And he died young at the age of 39. So I'm going to read the whole poem as one, and then we're going to go over it stanza by stanza. Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. All right, so let's look at it stanza by stanza. First off, we have a pretty good rhyme scheme going here. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. You will notice that basically every stanza except for the last stanza is a pattern of A, B, A. And the stanzas rhyme with each other. So it is A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A the whole way down. Summary of this stanza is that you should live your life to the fullest, right up until the last moment. When he says, do not go gentle into that good night, he doesn't mean, or he means to not just passively go into death. Don't just wait patiently for death to come get you. You should be living every moment to its fullest until death overtakes you. So rage, rage against the dying of the light. As death is coming for you, still be living your full life. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. So, wise men understand that dying is a part of life and it is natural, but also that they will keep trying to make the most of life until the very end, because their words had forked no lightning. This is a beautiful piece of imagery, this idea that the lightning is this spark that might catch a fire, and it's this moment of brilliance, and their words are what's creating that lightning. And because they know that they haven't done that yet, they keep trying right up until the very end. But notice again that right and night are rhyming with the previous stanza, and then they is rhyming with day in the previous stanza as well. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Stanza summary: people who die young, perhaps for a noble cause, good men, understand that they could have done much more had they not died young. It is my personal opinion that he is maybe talking about soldiers, seeing as he lived through 2 world wars. Obviously, he probably doesn't remember much about World War I, seeing as he was born the same year World War I was born. But he did live through World War II and was a fully functioning adult during World War II, and so he probably witnessed friends of his who were killed young in the war, lots and lots of death from World War I and II. He probably witnessed veterans or knew people who had survived World War I or had stories of relatives who did not survive World War I. So, he's very much talking about how they have died for a noble cause, but they haven't really got a chance to do much of anything. And I like how he says they're frail deeds, because everything is just so frail, so the words that I'm looking for are all just really high level words, I'm sorry. Just really temporary. They do not last. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. This stanza is, to me, talking about people who live their life to the fullest, often tend to shorten their own lives because of how intensely they are living their lives. So I'm thinking like adrenaline junkies kind of a thing. Big risk, big reward, but a lot of times it doesn't work out that well for people. So a good example might be somebody like, there was a young man who died when I was in high school, and he became famous because he had given up a very wealthy lifestyle, all this money, a good education, and he literally cut up all his credit cards, burned all of his money so that he could just sort of wander around and try to live life to the fullest. And he died because he was trying so hard to live that minimalist wildlife lifestyle that the wildlife killed him. Another good example might be the gentleman from the movie 127 Hours. Again, a very real human. He went out hiking, didn't tell anybody, and one of his arms was crushed by a boulder, and he had to cut off his own arm in order to escape. And he didn't die, but it's sort of one of those same things. He was trying to live his life so fully that it caught up with him. Another good example might be Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African American female pilot, and she died doing an airplane stunt. And again, she died doing what she loved, but she lived her life so very full, and she lived her life doing all of these high risk things, but she got a lot out of it before her death. But at the same time, he says they learned too late, they grieved it on its way. Sometimes people don't realize that the things that they are doing are going to ultimately lead to their death earlier than maybe would else have been. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. There is a lot in this stanza, though I talked a lot about the last stanza as well. Grave men probably both means serious. Grave can mean serious, somber, solemn, and also near death. Grave men, like they're near the cemetery. Blinding sight can mean either that they saw it suddenly or they didn't see it in time. Blind eyes could mean that they're literally blind because they're old. Maybe that they're choosing to ignore the coming of the night and they're choosing to instead rage against the dying of the light. I really like this idea that they have this moment of clarity where they realize that they can still live their life to the fullest if they want, and it makes their eyes fiercer and brighter and happier and more full of life right in the twilight years. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful image. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. This stanza is also very much up to interpretation. Dylan Thomas could mean his actual father or just some kind of figure of importance. The sad height could be because he's lifted his father up, or this person of authority, into a position of importance in his mind and is now sad about that. It might be because it's really hard to watch people that you have respected and revered for so long begin to fail and begin to break down. It's a very difficult thing. Usually in those kinds of situations, the person that you're watching has provided comfort to you, has provided stability, has provided assurance and authority, been somebody that you could turn to in times of need. And so then for them to turn to you in times of need and have that role reversal tends to make people emotional, tends to make people upset, tends to break people's hearts a little bit. It's very difficult to go from being the child to the parent and having to take care of your parent like they used to take care of you, for example. It might also be a sad height because he's sad that this relationship between the two of them, that he has had to put his father on a pedestal. Maybe it's really up to interpretation. I also like to where he says, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. A curse maybe because his father is dying, but a blessing because these tears remind you to live your life to the fullest. It's just really a lot of these things are up to interpretation. And that's a really lovely thing about poetry, is that if you can back it up with ideas and with evidence, there's lots of different ways that this can go. When he says, I pray, does that mean that the Father is a deity of some kind? Because we're tying in the idea of, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and the ideas of praying. Or is it just a supplication to his parent, his actual father? There's lots of ways that this can go. But the ultimate point is to rage against the dying of the light. Ultimately, I think this poem is meant to be positive and uplifting because it is both encouraging the reader to make the most of their life and also reassuring the reader that death is a peaceful, good ending. It is the good night. It's not a bad night. It's not a frightening night. It's not a nightmare. It is a good night. So even though you're raging against the dying of the light will die, and that is okay. But that's just my perspective on it. But you don't have to take my word for it. What do you think? Thank you so much for being here with me today, folks. Looking forward to the next one. The next one that we're going to be doing is some Emily Dickinson. Really looking forward to that. Hope you enjoyed this one. Remember, rage against the dying of the light.